It is Wednesday morning, and it is a sad morning. We saw what really amounted to a political execution yesterday, and no more responsible parties, including the U.S. Supreme Court, those six Republican appointed judges, Governor Parson, a Republican in Missouri, um, Donald Trump. He put those judges there, and Mitch McConnell, who stole those Supreme Court seats. They all have blood on their hand this morning. We're going to talk about that and so much more. We got Lauren Burke joining us now to discuss this political unjust execution. Lauren, first and foremost, let's just get your general thoughts on this Marcellus Williams situation, and how is it that everyone, all the powers that be, decided that this guy should die, even with prosecutors and everyone else, Cori Bush, everyone coming out, millions of people signed that petition, and yet the U.S. Supreme Court just totally ignored it.
Yeah, well, what happened to Williams really is an American tradition. There's really nothing new about this in terms of the question of black men and how they're treated by the country writ large and by the justice system specifically. But the question of, someone who may be innocent, who's a black male, and no one really caring in official circles about whether or not they're innocent or not, and deciding that it's better not to find out, apparently,
Mm-hmm.
is an American tradition. There's nothing new about that. Lynching is nothing new. Not caring about what happens to someone who's black is nothing new. The phrase "Black Lives Matter" is a challenge. It's a question and an answer and a statement all in one, and it's extremely powerful because of that. And in these moments, when you think of the phrase "Black Lives Matter," it's particularly relevant. There was a book that came out some years ago called "Without Sanctuary." And these are the types of things that are not taught in American schools. But what someone did was they put together a collection of lynching photography in the United States. Because what people would do is, what white people would do, is mobs would do, is they would lynch somebody black, then they would make postcards often. It was like a sort of almost like a street fair carnival type event thing. People would gather
Right.
around, then they would make postcards and send the postcards out. And somebody collected a bunch of lynching photography and put out a book called Without Sanctuary. You want to talk about things that are not taught in American schools. But of course, we know the entire journalistic career of Ida Wells was built on the lynching of two of her friends.
Right.
And again, this is something that has been a tradition in American society for 4 centuries. This is another form of it, a more officious form of it, in that Williams went through the justice system, which of course is unjust. And as you can see, a lot of people putting on X that famous statistic that half of the exonerations are black people, specifically black men. Half of the exoneration,
Yeah.
half of the time that we find that the person is innocent, that person is black. So that is an incredible stat. Everyone knows that. The governor knew that. Parson knew that. The Supreme Court knows that, but they don't care. That it's knowing facts and not caring that is the most scary thing to watch in this case.
Yeah, and I see what David Youngblood brings up, something that the governor said, which is really disturbing. And I think you touched on it too. The governor said it was more important to get finality after nearly 2 decades. And David says the bottom line of Black life is not that compelling. But to say to get finality, it's almost this audacity. How do you, when you have the office that prosecuted Marcellus Williams, said he's innocent, said that the DNA, there was no DNA, said that there is a lot of other doubt. They fought on the notion of they falsely removed or wrongly removed a black juror because that's a constitutional issue, and so they figured that would run and that would carry some weight, I should say. But for the governor to say we need to have a finality with this, I mean, how insensitive and just wrong that is.
Yeah, well, This is the United States. There's nothing more consistent than the way that justice is meted out on black individuals in the United States. It's always been consistent. It really gets back to the fact that black people had not been treated equally for so long. It was understood that black individuals were not to be treated equally under the law in the United States for so long. That was actually written into the law. I mean,
Right,
so
right.
I mean, this just sort of continues, right? And so the finality issue, of course, you would think that the question of justice would be more important than the question of finality. But because Williams as an individual is in a group that doesn't matter, to the greater society, there's not a whole lot of, other than the Innocence Project and a few other things, this doesn't really reach the level that it should reach. I mean, I'm not sure why Vice President Harris wasn't questioned on this. I'm not sure why President Biden wasn't questioned on this. Why is this just happening in front of everybody's face that somebody who's probably innocent, and the evidence is showing that, is being executed in 2024? And these are the types of cases when we look back, in the 1950s and 40s, you know, journalists, particularly white journalists, like to write about these things after everybody's dead. When it's the Scottsboro Boys and the
Right.
and the Groveton Four. Oh, let's look back on that. Martinsville Seven in Virginia. These things are happening in real time.
Yeah. Yeah.
This just happened. Is a repeat of our own history in the United States. Again, there's nothing new. There's nothing new about it. It's happened before. We had the Davis case right in front of everybody's face. This guy might be innocent, but we're executing him anyway,
Yeah.
and here we go again. And I don't see any mechanism other than protest, mass protest, and scaring the hell out of politicians that changes that.
Yeah, and to your point, what I've been seeing flooding the timeline is about voting. And when I see, but some people are skeptics still. They say, well, look, as I said at the top, Mitch McConnell stole the Supreme Court seat from Barack Obama. They did the same thing. They actually, his same excuse for stealing it from Obama, he turned it around and gave another one to Trump. They say, how does our vote affect something like that?
Well, frankly, it's not just the voting. I actually think the protest is sometimes more important than the voting. Telling people over and over again to vote, 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 and when they don't see any real change is problematic. There's got to be a real change at the end of that voting decision. The problem with our leadership in the United States is that it is bought by corporate interest. And so there's not the strong pronouncements that you would get if it wasn't controlled by corporate interest. And that's problematic. But this whole thing of telling black folks, we have voted. We voted in record numbers. That's why you've got Warnock in the Senate. And I mean, we've done that. Like we know how to vote. We don't need to be told to vote every freaking cycle. So there's something broken in the translation with regard to political advocacy. There's
Right.
something hugely broken with regard to political advocacy. What I think it is that we just have people who are not up to the challenge, who are afraid to speak truth to power on a regular basis, and are bought out by corporate interest.
Yeah, and those two things are very much a problem, bought out by corporate interest and afraid to speak up. Look, look what's happening down in North Carolina. We talked yesterday about Mark Robinson and his situation, and you talk about bought and paid for. I don't know another way of describing that guy, but we see so much of this. We see so much of this, and you mentioned protest. And it takes me back to all of the school shootings. And we talk about this all the time. Thoughts and prayers is all many of the politicians offer when there's a school shooting, but there's no action. But at the same time, you hit on something. I don't necessarily see protests surrounding school shootings.
No, but unfortunately, we've become oddly comfortable with that. School shootings are sort of a different thing because it's so random and you don't know. There's no real political reason in terms of it's a lot of these things. I don't know about school shootings, but mass shootings certainly there've been a political reason because people have left manifestos, typically that have been white supremacist and racist, as to why they pulled off the shooting. Certainly
Right.
El Paso, Tree of
Buffalo.
Life, obviously the Buffalo supermarket, and Mother Emanuel. I mean, there was a manifesto left
Right.
telling you exactly what that was. But the random 14-year-old is a little bit of a different situation. But protest clearly works, which is why you had Tom Cotton trying to write an op-ed in the New York Times talking about using military against Black Lives Matter protesters, because it works. It worked. It
Right.
scared everybody. It was changing the political calculus, and they knew it.
You know, we've been through the Black Lives Matter period, right? The 2020. I mean, we're still Black Lives Matter period, but you know that huge global reckoning that happened for a moment, which turned out to be just that, Lauren, a moment and not a movement, as they were saying at the time. Where do we go? Folks are no longer. You said it. The protest works, but it's really not happening. Where do we go? What do we do, Lauren?
Well, I do think protest works. I don't know why we stopped. I don't know why these Black groups stopped protesting. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm not sure why that happened. Of course, there's confusion in the leadership ranks of Black Lives Matter. There's confusion. They changed their entire, focus for reasons that remain confusing. Remember that the focus originally was on police brutality, which of course forces them to talk disproportionately about Black males and
Right.
injustice visited on Black males. So when we're talking about injustice visited on Black males, unfortunately, the leadership of Black Lives Matter had some problem with that. They wanted to talk about other people and other groups and all this other stuff. And I thought to myself, that's interesting, because when we look at so much of the injustice in the United States visited by the justice system, Black men are disproportionately the target and the victim almost all the time. I mean, and I get, oh, there's women and all that, and there's a stat out there that there's a growing number of women incarcerated, but the overwhelming target is Black men. And a
Mm.
lot of these groups are either co-opted by some corporate force that wants to only talk about women and wants Black women to only talk about women and forget about Black men. That's usually their biggest push, which makes no sense when you look at the stats. Whether it's school to prison pipeline, whether it's stop and frisk, whether it's arrest, whether it's imprisonment, Black men are all top list. So why are we only talking about one gender? But there's a political push to only talk about one gender, and for Black women to never be talking about Black. So that's part of the issue.
Yeah.
And then of course there's money behind that. And Black men have always been the vilified group, because if you can disable the men in somebody's community, you can disable the community, which is exactly what happened with the over incarceration period that we had in the 1990s. The men were getting disproportionately arrested. You don't have two breadwinners in the family. You don't have somebody viable to marry if you're female that's on the same economic level as you, or they're just not available because they're in prison or they have a felony and can't make money. So on down the line. Then you get idiots like Mark Robinson and Tim Scott and these Black Republicans talking about how it was the welfare state that caused that. Well, actually, it was probably the incarceral state that caused that
Yeah.
destabilization of the Black community. So that is something that right there is a reason to protest. Right there is a reason to protest. But our
Well,
politicians are the tip of that sword. And sometimes the Black Caucus to me has been strangely silent on some of these issues.
yeah. Strangely silent is a great way of putting it. Power 96 says Wesley Bell. He says that and well, he could have done more. I could my angle where I'm seeing the comments, but he said Wesley Bell could have done more. He says I think he's calling Wesley a paid clown. And David Youngblood says protests will do nothing. He said that man had black skin and his human worth was negligible. I can't talk again.
Mhm.
It's early. I'm way out here.
Mhm.
But and Power 96 again, he says he believes that voting does matter, particularly the three Supreme Court justices who denied, well, it's six of them who denied Williams' justice, right? There's a 6-3 majority there. But I mean, Wesley Bell is the prosecutor, right? And he did say, that there were problems with the case, right?
He did, but I don't think he's a particularly strong advocate for these types of issues. I think Cori Bush is a stronger advocate, which is why APAC targeted her. And again, I'm confused as to why the Black Caucus did not speak out more for Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush as that's happening. Because I think that, I think of the two people, it's not even close. Cori Bush speaks truth to power on Black issues a hell of a lot more than Wesley Bell.
Right.
So that for me, we'll see what he does in Congress, but I have a suspicious feeling.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Lauren, in Tempe, Arizona, at a campaign office for Vice President Kamala Harris, authorities responded to gunfire there. They found bullets, shattered glass, and they said we can confirm that what appears to be damage from gunfire. We hear all these reports about Donald Trump's alleged assassination attempts. Now we see this. This political violence. I saw a Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, go at Steve Doocy of Fox News about political violence. It's out of control, Lauren, and it makes you believe that come November, regardless of which way that election goes, there's going to be some problems.
Yeah, actually, there's some preparations going on literally right now with regard to security at the U.S. Capitol for the certification in January 2025, and I'm sure the inauguration, of course. Yeah, we live in a country with more guns than people, which is exactly the way the NRA. You want to talk about corporate influence and how corporate influence works. The reason we have more guns than people in the United States is corporate influence, the NRA. And nobody can counter that. And so there's guns all over the place. And so, wow, what a surprise. We're getting school shootings and mass shootings on a regular basis, more than any other industrialized nation. So that shouldn't be surprising to anybody that would get into our politics. We've had 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump. And it wouldn't surprise me if more happen. And of course, we have Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, saying incendiary things directed at a specific community of people, immigrants, on a regular basis at every rally they go to. So with all of that said, I'm surprised we haven't had more.
I think that's well put. Speaking of the vice president, a couple of things. We'll start here, though. Senator Joe Manchin said he's not going to endorse her. He's not going to support her after she called for to end the filibuster for abortion rights.
My whole career is that the 60 vote threshold that we basically operate under in the Senate is essential for us to maintain the type of I think the type of longevity we need in our bills, the type of security in our bills, and basically how we do business. It makes us different any place in the world. We're the most deliberate body in the world. So I've been very, very, very clear on how strongly I believe that when you go down that slippery path, you don't just do it for one issue. There's so many important issues that people have. What's important to me might not be important to you, and vice versa. So anyone says, well, I'm just going to eliminate the filibuster or the 60 vote threshold for this one subject. Well, Harry Reid tried that with just the district and circuit courts, circuit judges. And then the Republicans came back and did it for the Supreme Court. So once you start down that in policy and on policies, you'll have everything under the sun thrown at, and it'll dissipate. And then you flip-flop back and forth. You have no continuity whatsoever and no stability in what we do here.
Would you endorse her for president then?
I'm not endorsing her.
No. Okay.
He also referred to the filibuster as something that's sacred. And that when he said that too, it had to have made certain people's hair stand up on the back of their necks, because we know the history of the filibuster, why it was in there in the first place. But your thoughts on Senator Manchin's comments there?
I'm going to be glad to see Senator Manchin out of the Senate next year. I just think that he is a absolute media whore. His entire purpose is to stand in the hallway and win the attention of reporters and have reporters gathered around him. He is a shill for the coal industry. He's corporately owned. And he has massive conflicts of interest as related to energy policy, which nobody brings up enough. He has every right to have any opinion that he wants as a U.S. senator, as a private citizen, or anything else. Obviously, the people of West Virginia properly, he's properly seated in the U.S. Senate, but I'll be glad when he's gone, because I just think he's a waste of time. I think if you're a Democrat, and I know I say this with a 50-50 Senate, you may as well have a Republican there, because with a Republican, you know exactly what's going to happen. With Manchin, you have no idea what's going to happen. And it's always this sort of mystery. I think he was itching to switch to the Republican Party. I think this is Sean O'Brien syndrome of really wanting to be aligned with Donald Trump, and having that sort of feeling deep down that you cannot be supporting either a woman or a Black woman. I mean, we saw this with Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton's a white woman. You had white women go 53% for Donald Trump. Even they couldn't bring themselves to do it. I mean, we just have a long-held tradition in this country of certain groups, because of their historic marginalization, not being supported, and white women and Black women and certainly Black men fit into that category. And we see that history rise up in real time when we see this type of activity. You know damn well that if Joe Biden was still in the race, Manchin would endorse him.
Yeah.
And so would the Teamsters.
Yeah. And that's a great point, the Teamsters, because you got Teamsters, the national Teamsters won't endorse her, but then you have some of the locals that are saying, no, we're endorsing her. Why can't they bring themselves to do so?
Because she's a Black woman. That's the reason. I mean, there's no difference between her policies and the policies of President Joe Biden. So what then is the difference? Tell me what the reason is. I mean, if Joe Biden was still in the race, the Teamsters would have endorsed Joe Biden. And by the way, billions of dollars in pensions were saved by the Democrats. The Republicans voted 100% against the bill that would have funded the Teamsters pensions. I don't know what planet Sean O'Brien is on, what he's talking about. Yeah. I mean, if we just do policy, but we're not doing policy, we're doing race, and we're doing misogyny, and we're doing patriarchy. So you get these results.
Wow. Well, and I'm going to stay on the topic of the vice president, because it's something we talked about yesterday. I really wanted to get your feedback on as well. Big report came out yesterday about the finances or how they're spending their campaign finances, as far as not just Black media, Black-owned media, but also these grassroots Black groups that are pushing the vote, and therefore for the vice president. So many folks were in that article. Derek Johnson was none too happy, and no one was happy with Quentin Folks from the Harris campaign. There was a part of that article that said that he deliberately steers business toward white-owned entities and white media. And Quentin is Black, if you don't know this, folks. And it's a firestorm, because the article does, in some ways, well, not in some ways, but the article does sort of takes the blame off the vice president. Mignon Moore is also quoted in the article, so is Cedric Richmond. But it takes really the blame of her, saying that she inherited a team or a system that historically continues to ignore the very people they're trying to attract, i.e. Black people.
Well, one of the reasons there was two good reasons, I think, one good reason why it takes the blame off Vice President Harris is that if Jasmine Wright's reporting is accurate, that Vice President Harris is in fact interested in hiring minority vendors, Black vendors, that's one good reason to take it off of her. The second reason is I suspect that Jasmine Wright could not get on CNN on a regular basis or any place else and criticize the vice president, particularly on an issue like this that goes right to the heart of race and so many other things. One of the reasons I'm not a big fan of like sitting around like with the Oprah thing, although I think that really should have been a tribute to Joteka Edie and nobody else. But that whole thing of just sitting around talking about stuff is irrelevant. What's relevant is where the money is going. These campaigns are about money. These campaigns are about who gets these contracts, who can put on their resume after the campaign is over that they worked on the campaign, who can get the job in the administration after working on the campaign. and who can scale their business based on the money from the campaign. This campaign has raised over $500 million. Because why? Because we have a Black, lightning in the bottle, exciting candidate, a historic candidate, just as we had in 2008. And that lightning in the bottle is driven the volunteers, the money, and everything else. And then for some reason that I cannot figure out, Kamala Harris has not figured out, apparently, that having Anita Dunn and Jen O'Malley Dillon sitting around making these decisions is going to lead to this type of article. Because of course that's what that's going to lead to. They are going to hire their friends. They're going to hire the people they always have hired. Anita Dunn has made a series of terrible decisions that are well documented and somehow escapes getting fired every time you turn around. And finally, the guy from Morgan & Morgan called her out in the New York Times. The guy that's the owner of the Morgan & Morgan law firm is a major Democratic donor. I think he was the first person to finally say, this is a farce, And at any rate, it is the vice president's responsibility. Whether she wants to state it in the background or not, you run your campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You should be aware of who your vendors are. Quentin Fulks is where he is for a reason. These campaigns, the Democratic Party hires Black people who do not center Black people. And I say that realizing that Quentin Fulks did an excellent job on the Warnock campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But these firms are out there, particularly in the South. I don't care what anybody says. You have vendors who do food, who do music, who do all sorts of things that can get paid that are Black. And I know that they're always going to go to, but there's no Black mail firm or there's no Black polling firm. There is a Black polling firm. He's sitting on TV all the time. His name is Cornell Belcher, and he has a firm called Brilliant Corners, which did Obama's campaign. That alone should get him the contract, right? You did Obama's campaign.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, it is the vice president. I'm going to say it again. It is the vice president. It is your campaign.
Yeah.
If you want to make
Lauren,
this a priority, you make it a priority.
Yeah, and I'm glad you broke down about the vendors and others. We didn't talk about Black-owned media, and so I want you to talk about that because again, we're talking about a race where both candidates keep saying, even and acknowledging in their own way, how vital it is to get the African American vote, and yet you have Black-owned media, not just NNPA. But you have others, right? And I'm not here to advocate for others, but let's call it what it is. I mean, there's some, and I think they realize what part. Let me ask you this before I go into that other diatribe.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you this: I saw some, and I won't call this person out, but I saw someone tweet out, essentially, "I got mine," and it looks like a small ad. It looks like it probably was a few $1,000s. Isn't it too much of that? I got mine, because I remember during the controversy when CNN had the debate and didn't invite Black media, and April Ryan was one of maybe two who then amidst the firestorm, I mean, all types of Black media entities was calling CNN out, and April Ryan and one other person said, "Well, I was invited." Isn't it too much of that? Okay, you might have gotten a $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 ad. This campaign is spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and for you to a certain Black media entity, a certain Black newspaper, a member of a certain Black newspaper, to show an ad that probably they were paid maybe $20,000, $25,000 for, and one ad at that. It's too much of that, it seems to me, Lauren, that we have people like that who will jump up and say, "Well, I got mine," and it's really peanuts.
I think that what I remember what April said was that she had been invited. I don't remember it being a full-throated endorsement of how that went. Like, it was not good. And I know the ad that you're talking about with regard to the tweet that went out of there actually have been some ad buys. So certainly if you watch Roland Martin right now, you can see several ads running from the Harris campaign. I think 3, in fact. So I don't know that it's fair to say that the Harris campaign hasn't done any ad buys.
Oh no, and I don't think that the article. I don't think the article was saying they hadn't done any.
Right.
And let's be real. It was, and I'm going to say this because it was so publicly done. They had pledged $1.5 million to NNPA, 200 plus black newspapers, right? $1.5 million. I mean, is that something to celebrate?
Right. No, I agree with that point. I'm actually also sort of linked to that. Yeah, I mean, when you have a $500 million campaign, and this is no joke, there are several platforms that should be able to build to scale off of this cycle alone. Build to scale. I mean,
Yes.
be able to hire people after the campaign is over. There's so many ads, particularly when you're talking about a very close race in places where there's a lot of black people. So Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they're looking at North Carolina and Florida. I don't think she's going to win Florida, but North Carolina, she has a shot. There's a ton of black people involved in that. And of course, Georgia. Mm-hmm. So when you've got platforms in those spaces, which you have, they should all be making a ton of money in advertising right now. There's just no doubt about that. I'm actually slightly more intrigued by the quote in Jasmine Wright's story in Notice from Cedric Richmond.
Oh, I was going to say that.
Okay. I am a fan of Cedric Richmond, full disclosure. I think he's a good guy. But that quote sort of goes to a bigger problem in the black community, which is that for some reason, we're the only group that should be afraid to say that we want a contract. Yes, Cedric, we do want a contract. And nobody should be ashamed to say that. I'm sure Anita Dunn and SKDK aren't ashamed to say that. I'm sure Mark Elias and his law firm aren't ashamed to say they want a contract. They've gotten contract for years. Peter Hart and all these people get millions of dollars from the Democratic Party. And then Cedric Richmond makes it sound like black people should be ashamed to say that they want a piece of the pie that we created with the candidates that we bring that excite everybody. Whether it's Wes Moore, whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's Stacey Abrams, or anybody else that comes on here. We're the ones that bring the excitement. We're the ones that bring the volunteers. So, I mean, it is insane to me that anybody would say what Cedric said in that article, and we see it a lot. I think it goes to, frankly, in part, us sitting in church on Sunday and being told that money is the root of all evil. And if you're doing something for the money, then you're a sellout. That's all nonsense. Okay. Because I can assure you that Mark Penn and Anita Dunn and Peter Hart are paying their kids and grandkids private school and their houses in Georgetown and everything else, just like everybody else is. And there's no reason that black people shouldn't be doing the same thing. So that quote was the one that jumped out at me.
I talked a little bit about that quote yesterday, and I'm so glad you brought that up because, again, look, it's no sense of me going back into it. You've nailed it exactly. But once again, though, what the expectations on black folks are as opposed to other folks, it's just incredible. From a Cedric Richmond, from a Quentin Folks, from black folks in that campaign. And make no mistake, folks, one of the things, Lauren, in that quote, is about, he says it's all about money, right? Well, here's the thing. You get so much support. For instance, like you mentioned Roland, for instance, with the ads, right? Roland earns that, right? He has earned that.
Right.
You're not necessarily giving him anything. He has given you something that I'm sure whatever you paid Roland Martin, you're getting it back 100-fold. Because Roland has been pushing this thing and pushing against the misinformation and the lies that go out on a regular basis. And just about everyone that you find, Roland pushes back on, right? So Roland has done more than whatever you might be. I don't know what you're paying him, but I'm pretty sure he's earning it. But the other part of that is this idea that the vice president, and I won't call it an idea, it's truth that the vice president and President Biden have done a whole lot for black small businesses, right? And they work to do a lot for black small businesses. Well, many black media, certainly the black press, the 200 some odd papers in the black press, these are black owned small businesses. So your part of your mantra, Vice President Harris, is making sure to keep Black small businesses healthy? Well, by placing ads and partnerships with the Black press, with Black-owned media, you're not only they're not only enriching them a little bit by placing ads, but you are also helping a Black small business to actually go out and hire. In this case, it'd be hire more people, hire more maybe Black journalists who can blunt a lot of the misinformation that goes out.
Okay, two things. I agree with that, Stacey, but I also understand as somebody who's worked on a few elections, this is about winning, no
Yeah.
matter what. It's not about helping somebody's business. It's not about being friends with somebody. This is about winning an election. So when they buy an ad with Roland Martin, who has a ton of traffic coming in to a specific group of people that needs to show up big for the Democratic Party to win on November 5, they should be doing that to help themselves win an election.
Yeah.
That should be the number one reason. Not
Absolutely.
because they like Roland, not because they want to help Black business and help him. And I totally get that. And if that's the reason, I agree with it. But let's understand something. We look at these swing states. The two things are married to each other, because what wins you the election is you winning North Carolina, you winning Pennsylvania, you winning Wisconsin, and you over-indexing, if you're the Harris campaign, with Black votes. How do we know that? Because of Joe Biden in 2020. He won because of that Atlanta winning Georgia and those states that had all those Black cities that turned out. Everyone knows that. So when Biden got into office and turned around and said, actually he said it during the campaign, I'm picking a Black woman for the Supreme Court. Hey, Black voters, I'm telling you I'm doing that. Black voters heard him and acted accordingly. That all makes political sense to me. So I'm not a believer in doing things as a business owner or as somebody who's involved in politics because we like people or because we want to, even though your point is well taken, because in fact, I like your point about the misinfo, disinfo. Those people then work on which is the issue of our time. Misinfo and disinformation is the issue of our time. And Roland Martin in particular is doing a good job on that. But a lot of these Black platforms are focused on that as well. So what were you going to say? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, and I hear you, and I agree, but I also say this: it's not just about. I mentioned that helping because that's what they say. That's her. That's the vice president's. That's her mantra, right? Black small businesses. These are, and mostly in Black press of America, mostly these are women-owned, Black women-owned small businesses.
Right.
But it's not just about helping it. It is about winning because where these newspapers are located, a lot of these publishers have so much influence in their communities.
Absolutely.
Right. That the Biden, Harris, and other administrations totally underestimate, but they always come through. Yet Biden's not getting 93% of the vote in 2020, 93% of the Black vote in 2020 without the Black press.
Right.
But there's no question about it. Kamala Harris can only get 93% of the vote if she engages the way that she and Joe Biden did in 2020, and she's just not doing it.
Agree. And a lot of these Black papers are in places that this campaign really needs to be thinking about, right? We keep talking about Texas. A lot of these Black platforms are in Texas, and I mean that Houston, Dallas area. All those papers should be blowing up with ads. Okay. Florida is the other one. Florida Courier, that whole thing should be blowing up. And of course, Atlanta. So, I mean, it's married. It's not just about being, let's do stuff for Black business. Right. I mean, there is a obvious political reason to do it. And to just get back to your other point, you'd made a point about, we were talking about Cedric Richmond and all that.
Yes.
Part of what's happening is that we grow up in this country thinking that everything has to be the paradigm of effectively, and I know this is harsh to say it, but effectively master slave. Okay. So we're doing the volunteer door knocking for free on these campaigns. They've got Black folks doing the stuff that's for free, the phone banks or whatever it is, all the stuff that's free. The Black folks are doing that. And then the white firms are getting millions of dollars. Okay. And I know that Cedric Richmond knows that. Okay. But if you look at anything in American life, I don't care if it's politics, sports, or music. That's the way white folks always set it up. We're the talent, we bring the gate, you know. So Al Green or Sam Cooke, or my favorite example is Chuck Berry, who got ripped off by the Chess Brothers, right? Mm-hmm. Chuck Berry is touring the country. He has the talent. He can sing. He can play the guitar. He writes the songs, everything else. They're stealing his money. And the same thing, we finally, with this NIL stuff, finally that has been broken. You have, I'm not saying that there's not white athletes who are talented as well, but a lot of these black athletes that were playing for free, making millions of dollars for these schools, with some white coach standing on the sidelines with a clipboard doing absolutely nothing, making $4 and $5 million, the most highest paid official in the state system, and the black kids getting zero. Like that is what we are used to. And Cedric Richmond, I can't ignore the fact he's from Louisiana, where this is how it is. You grow up thinking that, oh, you're making all the money and somebody else, you're making the money, you're attracting the money. And that's exactly what had happened in July of 2024. Kamala Harris comes along. She puts the lightning in the bottle, the excitement in the game. She's got every constituency excited, from white women to white dudes to black women to everybody else. All right. Then the money starts showing up. Act Blue starts telling us they're making record fundraising. And you're telling me that there's no black vendors and that the black vendors should be ashamed to say that they want a contract? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, Cedric? Come on, man. I know he's smarter than that. So that was, I do sort of want to say about Cedric Richmond, keep in mind when you get quoted in a piece, a lot of times the quotes are chopped up. He probably said something a lot longer than that. There's a possibility that there was a lot more to what he said. But that for me was I had to read that 3 times before I continued reading it.
Did you spill your coffee, Lauren, on it?
Yes.
But not just the campaign, but the DNC, the DCCC, those folks have not done, I dare say, not done anything. Certainly not done anything with the black press. I'm not sure that they've done much with black media at all.
And it's interesting. They announced another record fundraising amount. Again, that to me, the DCCC issue, the Black Caucus should be on that. I'm not sure why they're quiet on that.
Right.
They're paying their dues money into that system. And most of them are from districts that don't have, you're not, unless you're, Greg Meeks or somebody, you're not sitting in a district with a bunch of Wall Street people, a bunch of people with a lot of disposable income. And so you're paying your dues into that system. And then they're taking that money. And by the way, usually putting it into frontliners who don't necessarily back the play of the party on a consistent basis. So the frontliners tend to be moderate Democrats. I'm having a struggle. I don't know if I should vote for health care. Those Democrats. So that's another piece in it. And the Black Caucus is so big now, over 60 people. Actually, with the death of Sheila Jackson Lee, I think it's at 59. But the point is, they've got a lot of power to say something. Okay. And in this moment, they should be saying something about the money. I know Barbara Lee had worked on that for years. Mel Watt has worked on that. He had worked on that when he was in Congress for years. They need to get back on that.
Lauren, last thing too on that. The election anyway. I know you always paying close attention to these things, to all these things. We see the different polls. We saw a Howard University poll that just seems flat out wrong, saying that 25%, I think the number was up, 25% of black men or something like that are in Trump's camp, or voting, leaning toward Trump or voting for Trump. What is exactly going on with this race right now? Where does it stand right now from your vantage point?
I think Vice President Harris is winning. The polls are indicating she's winning by a little bit. But when you see polls that are getting, they're even in North Carolina, that's not actually supposed to happen. There really actually shouldn't be any discussion in Florida or North Carolina. And there's a discussion in Florida and North Carolina. The fact that it's even close would indicate to me that, the polls generally, when you look at them across the board, are showing that she's 3 or 4 ahead in Pennsylvania. That's sort of almost game over. She does Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And of course, she won the debate. I mean, even the Republicans say that. All right. So it's almost but I do think that to talk about black voters and black men specifically, this idea that black men are going to vote are going to vote Republican and vote for Donald Trump, to me, is complete nonsense. For some reason, the media loves to make black men the boogeyman in every situation, and typically without a black man in the conversation. So for some reason, the media on the left, leaning left, loves to have somebody on in a round table that throws out some nonsense with zero evidence that black men are going to vote for Donald Trump. Where is the evidence of that? Okay, where is it? Where was it in 2020?
Right.
By the way.
Right.
And then the conversation that they keep dodging is white women voting for Donald Trump after everything that we know now, the E. Jean Carroll case, the grab them by the you-know-what, and white women are voting, and then they voted against a white woman, Hillary Clinton. That should be discussed a hell of a lot more than black men. That is weird. And we have evidence that happened. So there is no evidence that black men are voting for Donald Trump. I don't know why this keeps coming up, other than the fact that white producers like it to come up at CNN and MSNBC.
Now, Greer just put up a national poll number that had the black vote in general. I think it said 82%. If that is accurate, if that is likely black vote, if that is accurate, that, Lauren, on the face of it, seems a little troubling.
Well, yeah, whatever. Let's see what the poll on November 5 says. Let's see what the exits say on November 5.
Yeah.
Let's see that. Yeah. I mean, I just have a hard time believing that a group that's indexing over 90% for the Democratic Party, which would be black voters, the most dedicated group of black voters, as we know, are black women. They are followed by black men. So I don't know where they're getting these numbers from. I want to look at the tabs of that poll. I don't believe it. And I just think that, it's part of the fact that in these newsrooms, you don't have a lot of black men that represent the majority of black men. You just don't. You have outliers in other groups, but you don't have you don't have a black man in there with the 2.2 kids and the picket fence. I mean, that's hard to find in these newsrooms, and it's reflected on the air.
David Youngblood is asking Lauren if you can comment on Lichtman's prediction.
I don't know what it was. I know he's been talking online. What is his prediction?
I didn't see it either, David. David, you're going to have to bring it up for us. But
he usually predicts that the incumbency gives the incumbency gives a lot to incumbency. So when Biden was taken out, I know Lichtman was saying that's an advantage for the Republicans. I'm sure that's part of what he said, but I don't know that he has made his final prediction. But I do watch him. He's, I went to American University. I didn't have him as a professor, but he was there when I was there. And he's been right. He's been right several times. So he's definitely somebody to watch.
Well, I'm pulling it up. He says that there were two pivotal political statements. Nostradamus of U.S. elections. But he says the first was Taylor Swift's endorsement of Kamala Harris, who, of course, took over for Joe Biden. He mentions that was a huge thing. The second, it wasn't from another pop star. Instead, some election watchers waiting on pins and needles. Oh, okay, Alan Lichtman. And I'm not seeing still. I mean, they're setting this thing up that without a prediction.
Well, he says my prediction is that Kamala Harris will win.
Oh, this has been an avalanche. Yes. Go ahead.
So okay, he predicts that Harris will win. Well, that makes sense, because I do think that when we realize that Donald Trump has never gotten to 50%. And really lost the popular, of course, in both. Obviously, Hillary Clinton got 2.8 million more than Donald Trump. And then, of course, Biden gets 8 million more. So the trend is against Trump. And Trump says crazy things. And despite the New York Times' effort to try and ignore all of that, I mean, people can see with their own eyes that Donald Trump is not completely well. And Vance is a shill. So what are you voting for? Very negative campaign. One of the things I can't understand about the Trump campaign, extremely negative campaign. Why would people want to embrace that level of toxic negativity? I have no idea. And the Harris campaign is doing a good job counterbalancing that.
Right. And you're right. That's a standing question. The former president and J.D. Vance, it's a almost 100% negative campaign. It's negative campaigning, almost 100%.
Yeah,
There's
they're arguing.
nothing positive there. There's nothing to say. This is what you know. Any policy that makes sense. Anything. It's just attack, attack, attack.
And the other thing they're doing too that is strange to me, if you know your history, unless you're an American Indian or a descendant from slaves that were kidnapped from Africa, okay, in the 1600s, okay, you have no business criticizing immigrants because your family came over here the same way that everybody else came over here, and typically for the same reasons, which is to make a better life, make more money. I think people can see with their own eyes. I mean, most folks I see, particularly from Mexico, are in here busting their ass. Okay, they're working these jobs that nobody wants to work. They're cleaning people's houses. They're doing concrete work in the street. I mean, they're not here with their feet up. So I'm not sure what world these Donald Trump is talking about. And I don't care if you're in New York, but certainly these bigger cities that have a lot of immigrants. Now, do we have an immigration issue in terms of the number of people? Can we handle all these people? We do have an immigration issue. I don't think we can handle all these people coming over any more than any other country can. But that for me is interesting because if we turn back the clock to the early 1900s, the same game was played on Irish immigrants, on Italian immigrants, on folks coming over here from Russia, and particularly with regard to Irish immigrants. The Irish need not apply signs in the window and the anti-Irish sentiment. Certainly with Italians, it was, oh, they're bringing crime over. I mean, it was the exact same language. And Donald Trump is doing that. And I'm thinking, who is that appealing to? Because those people are sitting there going, wait a minute, my grandfather came over here to the sound of the same criticism. So I don't know what planet Donald Trump is on with that.
So a couple of quick things. Greer is asking, Lauren, how will the upcoming debate between Vance and Walz go, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a good question. What date is that? I can't even remember.
I think it's October 1st or October 3rd.
Oh, is it the 1st? Wow, it's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up. It's next week.
I think that Vance comes across as the guy that steals your parking space at the supermarket. In his driving his BMW or something. He lives in Delray, Virginia, which I'm in Delray, Virginia fairly frequently. Usually for reasons of going to the Dairy Godmother or something like that. Delray is a really cute community in Northern Virginia. And it is amazing to me. There's a vinyl record store in Delray, Virginia, one of the few vinyl record stores on the East Coast that are left. And everybody's got a comment that's negative about J.D. Vance. They talk very, very well about his wife. They see his wife on a fair bit. But everybody always has some little negative thing to say. But the guy just has the vibe of somebody who's a smart aleck, that likes to talk real fast and thinks he knows everything. And I just don't see why that's appealing. And Walz has the exact opposite impact. He's the friendly guy that owns the hardware store at the corner, and he's like the friendly neighbor, the overly friendly, talkative neighbor. I just think that is likely to come out, and people vote for who they like. They vote for the likable character a lot of times. It swings. When I say voters, I'm talking about the swings. Most people vote for their party, no matter what's going on. But when we come to swing voters, I think Walz is probably going to have an advantage.
Well, what about RFK Jr.? Will he still have an impact on this race?
I don't think so at all. I think that was the hope of the Republican Party.
Right.
I think he's going to have more of an impact, unfortunately, on the career of Olivia Nunzi than anything else, which was a shame. She's a good journalist, but that's a crazy story.
That is a wild story.
Yeah, I mean, it's not crazy that you may or may not fall for somebody, but RFK? All right. I mean, that for me,
absolutely wild. And now she said it was just sexting. It didn't go beyond that.
Yeah, I actually thought when I read that it was a complete non-story because they threw around the word affair like there was a physical relation. Right. There's no physical relation.
Well, I think the word affair comes in because he's married.
Okay. I think, I tend not to be interested at all in people's personal business, but the to me, the career-ending line this is a makeup brush, by the way, the career-ending line in the New York Post story, if true, that Nunzi emailed RFK to warn him about a hit piece that was coming up. That is a career killer. I mean, unless you're an opinion writer, that is a career killer. I mean, so she's not an opinion writer. So that was problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lauren, you know, we cannot let you go without getting some thoughts on Mr. Diddy and the in that situation. Any tea from you on that situation?
Well, I'm always going to believe no matter who it is and no matter what it is. I wait for proof and I wait for evidence. And particularly we talk about black men, because black men are guilty until proven innocent in this country. And that's been the case for 400 years. When the video arrived of him beating his girlfriend, that to me was sort of the end of the conversation. I've never been really paying attention to Sean Combs. To me, he just sort of moved weird, and I just something about him, but I've never guessed any of what is being alleged. But I still say this is alleged, and let's see what the government brings in court, because it is not illegal to have too many bottles of baby oil in your house. Okay, even though I know that's what the prosecutor loved talking about at the press conference.
Yeah.
But until we're dealing with specific allegations and specific people, and specific testimony under oath, I'll wait. And I don't understand what the rush is. I'll wait. I'm not a fan of watching black men or black people in general cast in a negative light on national TV with a bunch of white reporters talking about them endlessly, which we had with Cosby, which we have here, which we've had with R. Kelly. And I look at the global picture of you know, I have a hard time believing in all of rock and roll, which started in the 1950s, all of music, that when you tell me that there's sex parties, when you tell me we've had bands that have gone on tour. I mean, Kiss and a few of these bands have announced they go on tour for the sex parties. Yeah, and you're telling me the only people being prosecuted,
underage girls.
Yeah, I'm not sure the ages, but of course that would be patently illegal.
Listen, I'm a huge Aerosmith fan, but Steven Tyler, that was exposed, and he's got a baby with the girl was no more than 14 years old.
Yeah,
no one talks about it.
All I'm saying is, black men seem to be over-indexed in these types of stories. There's a lot of white male rock stars out there who seem to never be prosecuted, apparently, and you know, that goes all the way back to the 50s. Remember, Jerry Lee Lewis dated his cousin famously and then married her. And I think she was 14. And I wait for evidence. And I know that that's not a popular thing to say in the age of social media. People want to make a decision about everybody reading something on social media or listening to some prosecutor. By the way, that was the same prosecutor who effed up the Brian Benjamin case. That prosecutor in New York. Oh, we've got Brian Benjamin and all. And then the case completely fell apart. I wait for the testimony. I wait for the evidence. And I'm saying this as somebody who's not a Cosby fan and not a Sean Combs fan, but I'm still going to wait for the evidence.
Lauren,
you know,
what does it say that the defense, Combs and his team offered a $50 million bond, and it was rejected out of hand twice now by judges?
Well, what makes it unusual to me is that that's typically not what happens. And number two, if he's so dangerous, then what the hell was everybody waiting for? So if Sean Combs is this dangerous that he can't even make bond, okay, then why wasn't he being prosecuted 3-4 years ago? And the other thing that kind of is annoying is when you get these people, the bodyguard, the this, the that, everybody's, you know, where have you people been all this time? Now, I don't like to blame other people for the behavior of the principal, because the bodyguard may not have been the primary actor. I know a lot of people are saying, well, you know, he had to have had help and all that. That's definitely true. But the person actually doing it is, to me, the person who should be prosecuted. And I say that even with the George Floyd case. The cop standing around is different than the person who has the knee on the neck, in my view. But at any rate, I do think that, you know, I just don't like the general look of black men being paraded around as sex criminals. I mean, I know what the history of this country is. There's a fixation on that particular thing. And when I see no white people being prosecuted, you know, I mean, I guess we could say certainly Harvey Weinstein, Okay.
Well, to your point though, you talked about Diddy's music. So we talk about rock and roll, and you talk, it's a valid point for sure. It's about it doesn't, and you're not, and I know you're not doing this. You said it at the top. You're not excusing Diddy's behavior. We saw, if nothing else, he's guilty of brutally assaulting Cassie Ventura.
Well, what that tells us too, that Ventura, that attack on Miss Ventura tells us that you think that you're such a big shot that you can beat somebody in effectively a public space, a hallway in a hotel.
Right.
He chases her down. So I think we learn a lot from that video about his character, which is extremely low. And the fact that he lied his ass off on a video. You're so stupid that you think you can get away with that. So, I mean, I'm not saying we're dealing with some high character individual.
Right.
I'm not saying I'm going to be surprised if he gets prosecuted and thrown in jail. What I am saying, though, is, excuse me, he can't possibly be the only one that fits the description of what I've heard on these charges. When it comes to sex parties, I mean, Warren Beatty has spent his entire career, of course, Hugh Hefner died in 2017. Hugh Hefner spent his entire career doing what that prosecutor has alleged. And so I'm just confused. Where are the other prosecutions?
Yeah,
this isn't an argument for
how many bottles of baby oil were at the Playboy Mansion?
How about that? I just feel like, when we see disparate prosecution, we see it on all levels, the high levels and the low levels. I mean, you see it on stop and frisk, and you see it at a high level. And I'll say it. I mean, when I see Gloria Allred enter the scene, I get suspicious. Gloria Allred is
listen. My wife mentioned that yesterday. Like, oh gosh, where did she come from on this? Come on. I mean, we've heard lawsuit after lawsuit with Diddy, the last year or so, and all of a sudden now he's in prison, or in jail, I should say, and she pops up with an alleged victim.
Yeah, and again, I wait for facts. I don't care about your press conference. I don't care about your press releases, because we've seen it before, where the spectacular press conference happens, and then we get into court under oath. It just doesn't make it. The case doesn't make. So I'm not saying it's not going to, but let's find out. Apparently, allegedly, there's a video involved. And when I hear video, I mean, now we're talking about hard evidence. We're not just talking about people talking. Okay, where's the video? I mean, that should be fairly easy to produce in court. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. But Gloria Allred, her daughter Lisa Bloom, when they get involved, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. That's when I started to say, okay, wait a minute, hold up, something's not quite right here. But Lauren, we really, really appreciate you jumping on this morning, as always. We continue to follow you, whether you're doing Black Virginia News, whether you're doing Roland's show, or wherever you are. We appreciate you. Thanks, Lauren, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow.